Today we've got a Volkswagen Borer which has come in. The tyre had lost some pressure. We noticed it was a bit soft. It's been inflated and a couple of days later it's lost a bit more pressure. So we're going to take the wheel off and put the spare on. Now looking at this, it doesn't actually have a locking wheel nut, so that's one less thing to worry about. It's always a good idea to make sure you know where the locking wheel nut key is, especially if you're stranded somewhere with a puncture and need to change it. So in the boot of this car, it's fairly standard really for most cars. That's got a handy little hook on it to hold it up out of the way. You've got your jack there. I think this comes out. Yeah, so we can lift that out. So I've got the jack here, which is like a scissor jack. I'll show you how to use that shortly. One wheel wrench and a handle for the jack, which just hooks in there. Also the spare wheel. Usually there's something in the middle which just spins down and holds it in place. This is missing in here, so I can just lift that out. The tyre isn't fantastic, but it's still legal. It's got enough tread. The centre 3/4 of the tread, or just these main treads, needs to be a minimum of 1.6 millimetres, and those bars there are the 2 millimetre marker bar. So you can see it's not quite gone down to those. A little bit slick on the edges, but it's good to get you home, get you out of trouble. So we'll refit this. So as I said, it's got a slow puncture, this one. It loses pressure over a few days. I mean, when I go out to the car, I often just walk around it once and have a glance at the tyres, make sure they've got air in them. The other type of puncture you might suffer is while you're travelling along, you could get a sudden blowout, and that can catch you out if you're not careful. Really does make a difference whether it's on the front or the rear. I've had one go on the rear on a motorway, and that was a little bit scary. The car started twitching and a little bit difficult to correct and keep control of, but you could hear like a rumbling, a flapping. Obviously the car's not going to stop dead, so you can still manoeuvre it and drive it over to the hard shoulder where possible, and then start to change the wheel, which is what we're going to show you next. So I know it's not always possible because you never know where you're going to get a puncture, but if you can, it's best to be on a flat level piece of ground, preferably concrete, tarmac, something hard. You don't want to be trying to jack it up on grass, just end up with the jack sinking into the ground. So I'm going to put the handbrake on now and put it in gear. First or reverse will do. On this particular car, that'll help to lock the front wheels, and the handbrake works on the back. And being as we're lifting one of the back wheels, you want the other wheels locked where possible. So I'm going to chock these front wheels. You can use pretty much anything that's lying around, a couple of bits of old wood, some logs, some bricks, whatever you've got. Okay, so the car's in gear, handbrake on, 2 front wheels chocked. Next we'll loosen the rear wheel bolts. Right, let's loosen these wheel bolts off anti-clockwise with wheel bolts. Good idea to crack these loose before you put the jack under the car. That's it. I'll run that one as well. You can stand on these, makes things a bit easier. That'll do. Right, so we need to locate the jacking point on the back end of this Volkswagen Bora, same as a Volkswagen Golf, but when you look under the majority of cars, you will notice that the sill panel here, this lip, is a little bit thicker at the back end, and in the sill panel there, it's a little divot which should be like an arrowhead pointing down, so you know this is the stronger point to jack on. Put our jack under. It's got a little lip there which the sill panel sits in. There we go. That's it, we're airborne. Right, let's get these wheel bolts out. One wheel removed. Right, let's get this spare wheel on. Kind of lucky with this car that it's got a full-size spare wheel. A lot of cars nowadays use a space saver, which I think they're limited to about 50 miles per hour. They've got a big sticker on them telling you anyway. Right, so with the wheel bolts, you want to start them all with your fingers. A little bit fiddly to line up sometimes, but you just need to have a good look down here when you've got the wheel on and twist it until they line. Your car might have wheel nuts and studs, so when you take the wheel off, there are studs sticking out. They're a lot easier to get a wheel back on, slide it on over the studs and then screw your nuts on afterwards. But you do find the majority of cars nowadays use bolts. Okay, so they're all started. Put the wheel brace back on and just nip them. I'm not going to bother putting the centre cap in. That does just pop out of the other wheel and pops in there. But hopefully this wheel will only be on for a day or so while the puncture's fixed and the car comes back to swap them over. We'll check these again once it's down on the ground. Right, let's get this car back down on the ground so we can check the wheel bolts. doesn't hurt just to put a little bit of weight on there with your foot. Make sure they're nipped. That's it. One wheel back on and tightened up. Let's get all this put back in the boots. That's round the wrong way. That's better. That looks like that goes there. That goes in there. So I'm not going to put the spare back in the well because I need to get the puncture sorted out. So if you do get a puncture, I don't know where this one's leaking, it might just be a valve. Generally, tyre centres will only repair a puncture if it's sort of within these main treads in the middle. If it's too close to the edge and the shoulder, they won't patch it there. It's a little bit too difficult to get a patch to stick on a curved surface on the inside. Also, if there's sidewall damage, a split or anything, then unfortunately you'll be in for a new tyre. If you do phone up for tyre prices, you're going to need this number here, which on this particular tyre is 195 65 R15, and it's a good idea to make a note of that one as well, 95H. This is to do with the speed rating. Just give them that number, and most centres will offer you a budget tyre, a mid-range tyre, and you know, a well-known brand name tyre. Prices can vary quite a bit, so it's often worth getting a comparison. But yeah, that's about it really. I'll put this back in the boot, and hopefully it's got a puncture which can be repaired. They'll know as soon as they put it into a water butt or a bath where the bubble's coming out from. Sometimes it's just the seal between the tyre and the wheel rim, particularly with alloy wheels. Once the tyre's off, that bead around there, they can get quite corroded and allow the air to escape. So usually they would pop the tyre off, clean up the bead on the wheel rim and apply some black sealer, which looks a bit like black silicone, and that generally does the job. So there's not much point in carrying a spare with you if it's flat. Something well worth checking before it's too late is to make sure your spare is inflated to the correct pressure. On a lot of cars you'll find a sticker inside the door shut, either on here, this panel, or on the end of the door. This particular model is actually in the fuel flap. And there it is. I generally set the spare tyre to the higher pressure because you don't know where it's going to go on the car, and a spare tyre, when it's unused, just left sitting in the boot for months on end, they can actually lose pressure faster than if it was on the car being used.